We are all a product of the genetics from our moms and our dads, and we've looked to see if there is a certain increased frequency in certain genes so that it might be suggestive that certain genes are a predisposing risk factor. It appears that there's about over 200 genes that are associated with IBD, and again, this is in general not a specific cause of IBD, but it's one of the risk factors upon which other sort of factors trigger the true development of IBD.
These genes are usually dealing with the individual's immune system and actually how they respond to the bacteria within the GI tract.
I think the story of genes in IBD is quite fascinating. You take identical twins. Identical twins have the same genetic code. When we look at the incidence of Crohn's disease, for example, if you take one twin who has Crohn's disease and look at the other twin, it's only a 50% or less chance of the other twin also having inflammatory bowel disease or Crohn's disease in this instance. So it's fascinating to know that even though you could have an identical set of everything, environmental factors and genes, it's only 30 to 50% chance that both twins have the disease.
Gene abnormalities don't cause inflammatory bowel disease. They're an important role in the development of inflammatory bowel disease, but many people can have gene abnormalities that are seen in IBD but never develop inflammatory bowel disease. And again, that brings us back to an environmental trigger that has increased the incidence of inflammatory bowel disease.
We all have so many more cells in our body that are not our own body cells. These cells belong to organisms like viruses, yeast, bacteria, and they have their own micro world called the microbiome inside of our body. And our immune system, again driven by how our genetic makeup is, our immune system is in charge of keeping that relationship at peace. That interaction between the environment externally, the environment internally with the microbiome, the immune cell that is driven by the genetic makeup, it's that complex relationship that somehow is not in complete balance. And that's where disease, we think, comes from in inflammatory bowel disease.
There's been some really nice epidemiological data looking at environmental triggers. So antibiotics have been looked at as a potential culprit here. So clearly when you take antibiotics, they can do a good job at fighting off infections that are causing you problems. When you consume an antibiotic, it also greatly alters the bacterial flora inside your body, and namely inside the intestinal tract as well too. We've done research, and our colleagues have done research suggesting that a greater amount of antibiotic exposure at a younger age is related to a greater predisposition to develop IBD at a later time. So antibiotics are one potential culprit that we look at. The dietary piece is something that a lot of us have great interest in here. So one thing that's come out is that a greater exposure to dietary fiber, namely vegetable fiber, seems to have a protective association on the development of inflammatory bowel disease. An area that we are interested in and actively studying right now at Seattle Children's is food additives. Westernization seems to be a risk factor for developing inflammatory bowel disease. So food additives are an important component of westernization.
When we think of bacteria, we tend to regard them as something bad. However, these bacteria have been a part of us for as long as humans have been around, and most of them help us. They break down indigestible carbohydrates, produce essential vitamins, and they also coat our intestines, decreasing the possibility that bad bacteria can take over and infect our bowels. If we think of our intestines as a diverse community within us, we call that particular population a microbiome. Similar to a community like a city, these microorganisms inside of us, our microbiota, change, move out, and adapt in response to the changes in their environment. The bacteria in your bowels change depending on the foods you eat, the activities you do, and the medications you take. In animal studies, the fecal microbiota appear critical for maintaining intestinal well-being. In animal models, certain genetically modified animals develop colitis only in the presence of bacteria. In human studies, individuals with IBD have much less bacterial diversity. We're not exactly sure why this is, but it could suggest that this decreased diversity allows for invasive bacterial species to increase, coupled with decreased protective bacteria. This could result in inappropriate immune cell activation and loss of immunologic tolerance, leading to IBD. Clearly, we still have much to learn about IBD, but medical professionals continue to make new discoveries related to IBD as we work towards developing better treatments and a cure.